When you think of the American Civil War, what comes to mind? Gettysburg, Robert E. Lee? These names from the Eastern Theater dominate our memory. But I'm here to tell you that the war was truly won and lost hundreds of miles away. In the West, this is the story of how General William Tecumseh Sherman, the city of Atlanta, and the pivotal year of 1864 sealed the fate of the Confederacy and redefined America. The spring of 1864 was a desperate time. In the East, Ulysses S. Grant was locked in a bloody stalemate with Lee's army in Virginia. Casualties were staggering, and a war-weary North was losing its resolve. President Abraham Lincoln faced a serious threat to his re-election. His opponent, former General George B. McClellan, was running on a platform that called for a negotiated peace with the Confederacy, a peace that would likely have allowed slavery to continue. The future of the United States and the freedom of millions hung in the balance. All eyes turned to the Western Theater, where Sherman was pushing his massive Union army of 100,000 men deep into Georgia. His objective, Atlanta. Why Atlanta? Because it was the industrial heart of the Deep South, a critical hub of railroads and manufacturing that supplied Confederate armies across the nation. Capturing Atlanta wouldn't just be a military victory. It would be a symbol, proof that the Union could win. But the road to Atlanta was brutal. The Confederate Army of Tennessee, commanded by the cautious but effective Joseph E. Johnston, fought a masterful defensive campaign. They dug in on high ground, forcing Sherman to attack fortified positions. At the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain in late June, Sherman made a rare and costly mistake. Frustrated by the slow pace, he ordered a frontal assault against entrenched Confederate lines. The result was a slaughter. Union soldiers advanced into a storm of lead and iron. One particular spot, later known as the Dead Angle, saw some of the most horrific fighting. Men were cut down in waves. One Union officer wrote of the sound of bullets hitting bodies, like hailstones on a tin roof. It was a terrifying reminder of the cost of this war. Yet, even in the midst of this carnage, moments of shared humanity emerged. Soldiers from both sides would sometimes call informal truces to exchange goods, or to help wounded comrades lying in no man's land. These small acts showed that even in a brutal war, the men fighting it were still just people. Sherman learned his lesson. He would not repeat the mistake of Kennesaw Mountain. Instead, he returned to what he did best: maneuver. He used his superior numbers to flank Johnston, forcing the Confederates to retreat again and again, falling back toward Atlanta. This constant retreat worried Confederate President Jefferson Davis. He wanted a fighter, not a strategist. So he made a fateful decision. He replaced Johnston with General John Bell Hood. Hood was the polar opposite of Johnston. He was young, aggressive, and had lost the use of an arm and a leg in previous battles. He believed in one thing: attack. And attack he did. Within days of taking command, Hood launched a series of ferocious assaults against Sherman's armies around Atlanta at Petrie Creek, the Battle of Atlanta, and Ezra Church. Each time his men charged with incredible bravery, and each time they were repulsed with catastrophic losses. In just over a week, Hood lost nearly a third of his army, crippling the only force that could defend Atlanta. Sherman tightened his noose. His final move was to swing his armies south of the city to cut the last remaining railroad line at Jonesboro. Hood was forced to evacuate, and on September 2, 1864, Sherman sent a simple, war-altering telegram to Washington. "Atlanta is ours and fairly won." The news electrified the North. The fall of Atlanta was the victory Lincoln desperately needed. It shattered the narrative that the war was a stalemate and demolished McClellan's chances in the election. People saw a light at the end of the tunnel. Soldiers in the field, who could vote for the first time in a presidential election, voted overwhelmingly for Lincoln, the man who promised to see the war through to total victory and emancipation. Lincoln's re-election ensured that the war would continue until the Union was preserved and slavery was destroyed. With Atlanta secured, Sherman didn't rest. He proposed a radical new plan. He would abandon his supply lines, cut his army loose from the outside world, and march 300 miles to the sea, living off the land and destroying everything of military value in his path. This was the famous March to the Sea. It was a campaign of psychological warfare. Sherman's goal was to break the will of the Southern people, to show them that their government could not protect them. His army became a terrifying engine of destruction, tearing up railroads, burning factories, and seizing food. For the thousands of enslaved people in Georgia, Sherman's army was a beacon of freedom. They flocked to his columns by the tens of thousands, seeing the year of Jubilee at hand. But this journey to freedom was also filled with tragedy. At Ebenezer Creek, as Union forces were building a bridge, panicked officers pulled it up too soon, leaving hundreds of formerly enslaved men, women, and children stranded on the opposite bank, at the mercy of pursuing Confederate cavalry. It was a heartbreaking moment that highlighted the complex and often brutal reality of emancipation. While Sherman was marching through Georgia, the remnants of Hood's Confederate army made one last desperate gamble. Hood marched his army north into Tennessee, hoping to draw Sherman away. But Sherman ignored him, leaving General George Thomas to deal with the threat. At the Battle of Franklin, Hood ordered a suicidal charge against fortified Union positions, effectively destroying his army. 2 weeks later, at Nashville, Thomas finished the job, shattering the Army of Tennessee for good. The great Confederate Army of the West had ceased to exist. By early 1865, the Confederacy was collapsing. Sherman's army swung north from Savannah into the Carolinas, continuing its path of destruction. Lee, trapped in Virginia by Grant, finally surrendered in April. The Western campaign had been decisive. By destroying the South's industrial base, crippling its armies, and shattering its morale, Sherman's campaigns made Lee's surrender inevitable. The Civil War saved the Union and ended slavery, but the peace that followed was complicated. The era of Reconstruction attempted to rebuild the South and secure civil rights for African Americans. But it ultimately fell short, leaving a legacy of unfinished business that we still grapple with today. The war was an extreme test of American democracy. It pushed the nation to its breaking point, but ultimately, the system survived, reforged in fire and dedicated to a new birth of freedom. The story of 1864 is a powerful reminder that history is not inevitable. It's made by difficult decisions, immense sacrifice, and the actions of people who refuse to give up on the future. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history. See you next time.